Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The deadline is here, Andy. And the Lakers have already made a huge move heading in. That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always free. It's never going to be behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out with an ever-growing community of Lakers fans, now over 11,000 subscribers strong, all of whom, Andy, if the Twitter results for the poll that we put up, just a simple question, are you in a better mood? Yes. According to about 90% of the people who follow us on Twitter, the Lakers having made a really significant move on Wednesday afternoon. They acquire D'Angelo Russell, former Laker, along with Malik Beasley. So D'Angelo Russell from Minnesota, and then Malik Beasley, shooting guard from Utah, and forward Jarred Vanderbilt, both again from the Jazz. This in exchange for Russell Westbrook, Damian Jones, Juan Toscano-Anderson, and a lightly protected 2027 first-round pick. So, Andy, it was only a couple days ago we were talking about, I'm not going to say lamenting, but certainly talking about losing out on Kyrie Irving and what that might have meant for all the pomp and circumstance around Tuesday's game. From a team standpoint, it felt like something broke. We talked about it for Wednesday's show. It felt like this team was at a real potential turning point where it could go south real fast if nothing was done. Something was done.
Yeah, and I think this was a really good move for the Lakers. First, I mean, there's the actual basketball of it all. Like, I think D'Angelo Russell, you're getting scoring, you're getting outside shooting, you're getting somebody that may not be a high-end level point guard. In a lot of ways, I think D'Angelo is kind of a shooting guard in a point guard.
He's not a point guard. He's not a point guard in a sort of a meaningful way.
He's a shooting guard who can make plays, but he is somebody that can take that degree of pressure off LeBron while legitimately spacing the floor. And as much as, we covered D'Angelo when he was with the Lakers, through all the controversy that went along with him a lot of times, particularly in the last year. Speaking for myself, I actually always had kind of a soft spot for him. But in the meantime, though, this year, he's actually sneakily, because there's been so much chaos with the Timberwolves, he's sneakily having a really good year. He is putting up career highs in just about every scoring or shooting statistic out there. Malik Beasley gives you scoring and shooting, more of that. And we've seen over the last few weeks, the Lakers, their outside shooting is starting to become more of a thing like it was.
It's been a massive problem. It was terrible at the beginning of the year. It got better to the point where you think, okay, maybe. But the part of the problem here, Andy, too, is even when the Lakers make a decent percentage of their three-pointers, they don't make enough of them. They're a very low volume three-point shooting team. So even when you have a good night, you still tend to be chasing teams from three-point range. Obviously, Beasley is as high volume a three-point shooter as they've had in forever, basically.
Yeah, and look, D'Angelo takes 7 a game. I mean, you're talking about two guys who shoot three-pointers with both accuracy and frequency. And that is
Russell at 39% for the this year, and Beasley around 36 for the year, but he was at 38 the year before and 40 the year before that.
Right. So they are both credible and people that you will pay attention to doing it. And then with Jarred Vanderbilt, like he is a minus offensive presence, I think, to put it kindly, but he is a really athletic, energetic, good defender and somebody who can defend along the wings and somebody that I think can help shore up the perimeter defense that has really been an issue for the Lakers all season just in not having enough options for it. Like there's only so many things you can ask Troy Brown to do along the perimeter at once. And they haven't really had a lot of guys. They've had a lot of guys willing, but not really a lot of guys capable of doing it or that really should be doing it in the first place. Jarred Vanderbilt should be able to help along those lines. And, when we're going to talk about this, talking big picture with this team's mood, but also big picture, there's a lot about this deal that I just like.
Yeah, and just to kind of keep talking about the players that the Lakers have acquired, and obviously, they're not going to be expected to play. They're not going to play on Thursday. They're expected to be in the lineup Saturday when the Lakers are in San Francisco to play the Warriors. To the point, like Vanderbilt has been a negative offensive player. He's still not a great offensive player, but he's getting much closer to neutral. I think where he's clearly a negative is if you want the 3 and D to go together. He is not a 3 and D guy by any stretch. It's a terrible outside shooter, a little more credible inside the arc, but he is an incredibly low volume offensive player. So he's not going to suck up a high usage guy at all. And, a little like sort of Wenyen Gabriel-esque in the sense that he can finish smart. He makes the right cut. He can do that stuff. And over the course of his career, if you want to look at things from an analytics standpoint and just start pulling out a few different metrics, he's gotten much closer to neutral. And
that's
what
good.
I think is and that's valuable. And what I think is really interesting about this, is, from Vanderbilt's perspective, you can play him between LeBron and AD. You can play him as a small ball center. You can do a lot of stuff with him defensively, and he's only 23 years old, and he's the kind of player that good teams need. But you can also get away with having a lesser offensive player when you have more floor spacing to allow that player to move around and get cheap buckets, offensive rebounds, whatever it might be. And credible offense in other ways. And certainly Beasley and Russell provide that for the Lakers offense in ways that are just much more fluid and easier to work with than, say, the offense that Russell Westbrook was providing.
Yeah, and there's just a lot more optionality right now on this team. There's a redundancy where, stop me if you've heard this before, but they have too many guards. And, there are reports that the Lakers are still looking to make moves. We certainly hope that nothing necessarily breaks between now and when you hear this show, but there's only
second time for people. The second time we've done this show today.
Yeah, and there's not going to be
take one was, hey, there's a rumor out there. Let's talk about it. And then 40 minutes after we were done, the rumor was a thing.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you're welcome, Los Angeles.
Yeah. There's been talk, though, that Patrick Beverley and or Lonnie Walker could be sent out separately together. Obviously, the more substantive moves would be together. And if they were a solo venture, Patrick Beverley, because he just makes double Lonnie Walker's salary. And I feel a little bad for Patrick Beverley. He tweeted out a photo of him and D'Angelo Russell from their days together with the Timberwolves last season. Seemed excited to reunite. I actually had thought when I heard the rumors about this that there was a chance that the Timberwolves would want Beverley as part of that deal because he had been so great with their culture, which has been an issue this season. The Timberwolves, by the way, are getting Mike Conley Jr. basically to replace D'Angelo Russell,
which is a nice fit for them. It's actually
it is.
This is not a blow it up. I don't think Conley would have been a good fit, as good a fit for LA, but in Minnesota it makes more sense. It's not a blow it up deal by any means. Russell is and we'll get to the long-term implications of all these. Russell's free agent after this summer. Beasley has a team option. So the Lakers obviously control that. And Vanderbilt's still under contract for another year. So
about $4.5 million.
Yeah. So you look at this deal, it's very possible that if they do clear some stuff out, it is for a couple picks. It's, shipping Lonnie Walker somewhere for a second round or whatever it might be. It may not be for players that are designed to make an impact for the Lakers this year, but there still is talk, Andy, that, pick a Bogdanovich, any Bogdanovich, the Lakers, interested in Boyan with Detroit if the Pistons were deciding to move him, or Bogdan in Atlanta if the Hawks were to move him. Those guys would probably cost that second first round pick. But D'Angelo Russell becomes probably your starting point guard.
There's no
Beasley,
probably. He's going to be starting.
Yeah. Beasley is either your starting 2 or your 6th man now. And Vanderbilt is going to be a prominent player coming, at the very least, coming off the bench, or depending on how you want to arrange the lineup, it's certainly, I guess, possible he could start. He has started many, many games in the NBA. So let's talk about what we think this is for the Lakers going forward, what this can do for a team that after Thursday's game against Milwaukee, where they will be a little bit shorthanded, could be 6 games under 500 in a West that seems to be gaining a little bit of steam, but isn't out of reach. So what's next? That's next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel, and Super Bowl is just around the corner. We are stoked about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they are the #1 sports book in America, FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers, just talking about you, join today. Get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place just your first $5 bet. Sign up at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to the point spreads, player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, easy to use. So again, football fans, big day coming up Sunday. Do not miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Okay, so look, this is not a perfect trade in the sense that it transforms the Lakers into the kind of instant front runners that Rob Pelinka seemed to be holding out for a couple weeks ago, at least in the context of getting, trading both of those picks. You added Bogdanovich.
His literal word was front runner in talking about this. We're not reading into it. It's what he said.
No. If you add a Bogdanovich Thursday before the deadline, that is not going to transform them. But, it certainly improves them. There are still problems. If you weren't a fan of Russell Westbrook's defense, you are not going to like D'Angelo Russell's. Beasley is not a particularly accomplished defender. Vanderbilt is, particularly when deployed effectively, he can be something the Lakers have not had. Rui Hachimura, much more of a large body who is, centered around scoring rather than defense. And so, it doesn't make the Lakers perfect, but you've added 3 players to your rotation that mean the 3 least players in your rotation won't be there anymore. And that is a huge deal. That is a major upgrade to add 3 legitimate rotation players that would be rotation players on most teams in the conference.
Yeah, it's also, we've talked a lot about the closing issues and the lineups for this year. And, with these new players in there, some of, those questions may not be necessarily answered by the presence of D'Angelo Russell or Malik Beasley or Jarred Vanderbilt. But if nothing else, having better players out there can possibly make it so the closing issue becomes less of a thing more often. Like, you're still going to need a quality closing unit and one that's reliable, that plays well off each other, because tight games are just part of the NBA. But if you can have a better rotation for the first, 44, 45 minutes of a game, sometimes the last 3 become less significant. Or, if nothing else, we've talked all season long about no margin for error, a 7%, 10% greater margin for error, maybe even 15% better, because you have a better rotation. The middle of your rotation becomes better. The Lakers desperately need that for where they are in this season and what they're trying to turn around.
And, you look at it and go back to Tuesday's game, which was outside of the incredible human accomplishments of LeBron James. This is a very depressing evening. It ran into the formula that we've seen throughout the season. The Lakers can compete against any team in the league on any given night when LeBron and Anthony Davis are playing at their peak. We saw some of that, pre AD injury. LeBron himself was able to carry them through some games, that you wouldn't have expected. They held in without Anthony Davis better than anybody thought they were going to. But the basic formula of that supporting cast was, if those guys play at an all-world level, first team caliber all NBA, then they got enough stuff. Then you can get enough from Reeves and Schroeder and Beverly maybe one night and Hachimura or whatever it might be to kind of fill in, and you get enough. Maybe it's Thomas Bryant. But if one of those guys doesn't perform, their chances of winning plummet. And AD was bad on Tuesday. LeBron put up numbers, AD didn't, and there wasn't enough other stuff there. And so now we have been, look, you and I have railed against the stars only policy of this, team and how they build rosters and whatever, and the obsession with stars. We've been talking about the need for a middle class to make this team competitive and fill in something that's credible around these two stars. This is a step that does that. They're not perfect players, but your seventh or sixth best player usually, isn't. But they have three more good rotation players who have, really valuable NBA skills than they did before. And that is just, it's a really big deal.
Well, what Rob Pelinka did today with this move is, we've talked before, it's been very widely debated, scrutinized, railed against, however you want to put it, like Rob Pelinka's abilities as a general manager, and there's always the question of how much of this is his vision versus the vision being dictated to him by Jeannie Buss, if for nothing else financially, not necessarily her own vision, although I think the star culture is as much a product of Jeannie as it is anybody else. How much of this is Kurt Rambis, whatever. But a concern I have had for a while with Rob Pelinka is that there's no imagination that goes into constructing a roster. It's basically nobody matters but the stars. And if you get the stars, you can figure out everything else. And yeah, occasionally it works out that way, but more often than not, I think it takes more thought. And this type of deal that they made today, not only do I think is going to make them better this season, how much better enough remains to be seen. The Lakers dug themselves a pretty deep hole that they need to get out of, and they do not have a lot of margin for error. But what I think this deal potentially represents, and this is something I've been calling for a while, start building next year's team now. And I don't mean punt this season, because I don't think they are doing that in the slightest. I mean, give yourself an opportunity to actually build some cohesion. So if this year doesn't work out the way it does, you want it to, you get a head start on next year. And, I think there's a decent chance, a good chance that D'Angelo Russell could be on this team next year. If nothing else, they're going to give him heavy consideration. And
well, look, he is a guy who, like you said, he's not an on-ball point guard. He is not Russell Westbrook, who thrives with the ball in his hands. He is a scorer. He needs the ball eventually, but he
likes to probe. He likes to have.
Yeah, it is not out of the question that he and LeBron and are playing off of Anthony Davis, as long as D'Angelo is willing to kind of fit into a slot, kind of fit into a role. It is not, there's no reason. It is we had Jovan Buha in, and we did some radio work for 710 ESPN and carried the Laker games on Wednesday night, and reacted a lot to this trade with Jovan Buha from The Athletic on. And I think, one of the things that we all kind of agreed on is, like, D'Angelo's not a perfect fit, but he's a better fit than Russ.
He is a better imperfect fit.
Yes. And with the potential to be something different, just because contextually Russell is it's so vastly different that, I have some optimism. But like you said, like, Andy, this is Hachimura is somebody that they've talked about re-signing in the offseason. I'm not somebody who I think, I don't think he's a transformative player, but he's a rotation quality player in the NBA. Beasley ought to be around next year unless he's traded for something else that will be. And, you have the potential to bring back Russell. Vanderbilt will almost surely be around. It's like they not only are building next year's team, they're also indicating that the approach that they've had is genuinely shifting, that they are interested in building a squad around their two stars, that they're not going to consistently try to make the better the enemy of the good, and they will do sort of the hard work of real live team building. And that is something that, quite frankly, they have not been dedicated enough to doing, because you feel like the star is always the quick fix. So let's talk a little bit about the long-term implications. We still haven't asked the question of how good do you think this can get them? Where do you think they can go?
Also, I mean, it's worth a few minutes discussing just Russell Westbrook and his
the end
here.
of the era. It is the end of an era that we all wish had never happened. So we'll get to those things next. Do want to remind everybody that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. Let's say they lose Thursday night. Certainly a strong possibility. You're 6 games under 500. You're a couple games out of the play-in. You're probably 3 or 4 or 5 games out of, those higher seeds in the Western Conference to get up to 5, 3, 5, 6, 7, whatever it is. How much improvement do you think this can give them? Because I do think there's obviously the literal improvement in their roster quality. You're trading one very problematic guy in Westbrook and 2 guys who do not play for 3 guys who will. And so there's that. There's the emotional lift that comes with the team showing some commitment to what they're doing, and all that. But there's also the giant hole that they're in. So how high do you think this could actually elevate them?
I think it helps. I mean, obviously there are so many moving parts that, at the risk of stating the totally painfully obvious, you got to see how it looks first. But for example, if Patrick Beverley is not traded, I assume he will keep his starting job. And if it's him and D'Angelo Russell, they've played together before. Mm-hmm. That is really helpful for a situation like this that's being rebuilt on the fly. We've joked before about how the Lakers have become Wizards West, with at one point Russ, Rui, Troy Brown Jr., Thomas Bryant, all former Wizards, all on this team now. But for something like this, it is helpful that you have a few guys who are familiar with Rui Hachimura, familiar with Troy, familiar with each other. That is helpful. LeBron, scouts the whole, we joke about how, LeBron has been scouting every player in the country since they were 14 years old, but the truth is LeBron knows pretty much every player and every tendency pretty well. And he's pretty good at putting malleable enough players in a good position to succeed. We talked before about, and bright players like Thomas Bryant figured out pretty quickly how to play with LeBron if you want to look good. So there are things to figure out, and they don't have a ton of time to do it. But if nothing else, I think they have better players and more depth and better options to be trying to figure it out while scrambling than the period they were in, where they seemed to know each other and weren't getting anywhere.
It's kind of funny. You look at this and you hope these are good problems to have. Fans who are, for example, who have been clamoring for Wenyen and Gabriel to find minutes are going to be really challenged now. With Vanderbilt here, it's going to be almost impossible. But Vanderbilt with LeBron, with Anthony Davis, with the some minutes for Thomas Bryant or whatever, and you have Hachimura. how do you divide up those minutes? And in the backcourt, you're adding Beasley, you're adding D'Angelo Russell, you're adding guys who are going to play and are need to be playing 25 minutes a night, give or take, maybe more, maybe a little bit less, but whatever.
Plus the guys still on the roster you expect to play.
Correct. And so actually, and Jovan mentioned and talked about like some of the deals they might make could just be to clear space out. You trade guys for a pick because you need them off the roster because you have too many players. But that these become good problems for the Lakers to have. You want to be playing, having to figure out how do I get all of my good players to play rather than how do I avoid catastrophe. And I'm not going to lie, this is not an area where I think fans currently have a lot of confidence in Ham. But I'll say this, even if you're somebody who doesn't believe in Darvin and his ability to identify a rotation and decide who ought to be playing and who, it is always better if you don't believe in the players that your coach is choosing to have him choose between better players. That's better.
The Russ, Schroeder, Beverly problem has been solved, if nothing else. Like,
at least in part.
You ain't going to be seeing that anymore.
But fans don't look, and fans don't want to see Pat Bev on the floor. And I think people are probably fine with Schroeder. Beverly is the next avatar of sort of failure and of anger at Darvin. And in an 18-minute a night role, there could be something there for Patrick Beverly. But will Darvin do that if he's still on the roster? Will he play? Will he start him, which is fine, and play him 18 minutes a night? I don't know. I really don't know. But like Russell is going to have to play, and Beasley's going to have to play. And there's what appears to be addition by subtraction. The Westbrook situation reportedly eroding, certainly on Tuesday, but more so, relatively recently, that just wasn't going to end well. And he, even when he was playing well, was still an awful fit.
Well, it's also too, like, the last couple weeks, I had mentioned before on a couple shows that Russ seemed to me like somebody who was preoccupied with what's happening to me moving forward. Like, what's my place with this team moving forward? He is hyper aware that they were looking to move him. He was hyper aware, frankly, that LeBron wanted him moved because, when LeBron was saying disappointed that we didn't get Kyrie Irving, as much as he wants Kyrie on this team, he is by extension saying, and I'm disappointed that Russell Westbrook was not moved in the process. And even if you want to believe that that's not personal, like it's just about finding a better fit. LeBron is the guy that pushed for Westbrook in the first place. It doesn't change the fact that Russ is aware, dude wants me traded. Anthony Davis probably wants me traded too. I know everyone
right. wants me gone. Everyone does.
We talked with Jovan. He's he, as of today, when you're hearing this podcast, he will have a report that he told us out about just inside this deal, things that have been going on. And Jovan is as good as anybody covering this team. You absolutely want to read it. He's a friend of this show too. You've heard him on with us before. But he said the situation with Russ was starting to become untenable in ways that went beyond the on-court awkwardness and imperfection. Like, he was starting to get upset more at the idea of not closing games. He was starting to get more dissatisfied with his role. And Westbrook is just too big of a presence to be unhappy like that. Whether you think he's right or wrong, honestly, doesn't even matter. And you and I, as much as we've criticized Russ for a lot of his play or style or certain, recklessness during games, we've maintained through this season that we thought he's been pretty professional in terms of a role.
I mean, for doing something, he has
something
changed
he doesn't want to be doing.
Right, he's doing something he doesn't want to do, and he's changed how he's played, but he's accepted the deployment aspect of what he is, and the changing of playing time and not closing and all that stuff, and he's generally speaking accepted it. But
If you lose that professionalism, then it's all gone. Like, that's the difference between what went on between Frank Vogel and Russell Westbrook, where Westbrook was frankly not professional about the things Vogel wanted him to do and the relationship between him and Vogel, versus what we saw a lot of this year between him and Ham. That's the difference.
It's just, and I think the biggest thing that you're saying there that I think is really critical. And we'll, as we kind of wrap up here, Russ was too outsized a personality and too outsized a presence and too outsized a talking point for the role that he played on this team and for the quality that he brought. There was a need because of his first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest players of all time. He's not that guy anymore, but he still commands that kind of presence. Is sort of expected to get, he gets that kind of respect, I guess, from and deference to some degree from Darvin, although he's perfectly willing to bench the guy in the fourth quarter. We've seen it over and over again. But it's just like, when your sixth man doesn't finish games, it's not supposed to be a talking point at the end of it. Like, that's, unless your sixth man is like Manu Ginobili
or Lamar Odom.
Yeah, it's just not, that's not how teams are supposed to operate. If Malik Beasley comes off the bench for this team and sits some fourth quarters, it's not going to be talked about like in a, wonky basketball types and lineup dissectors and all that might look it over, but it's not going to be a national talking point. It's not going to be something they talk on sports radio. Whereas with Russ, he was too much house. That was part of my argument against acquiring the guy in the first place. He's too much house. And now a lot of things are just put in a simpler order. It will be an easier team for Darvin to coach, even with the fact that you're adding 2 minus defenders on the perimeter. And you've got to integrate 3 rotation players in the final 27 games of the season. Or 26, I think, by the time those guys were actually in it. It is a difficult challenge for Ham. It may not be enough to sort of save this season, but I think their thinking is like, if we can get in, give me prime LeBron playoff, caliber, give me what AD was doing a month and a half ago before he got hurt 2 months ago, and a decent rotation. Take a shot at that.
Yeah. I mean, if nothing
it's
else,
reasonable.
I think these guys will be excited more, like at the prospect of what lies ahead of them, and just feeling like they have more of a sense of purpose and reason for the remaining games this season. Fare thee well. Fare thee well.
It's good work. We've been very critical of Rob Pelinka. This is it doesn't undo the damage, but this is as good an outcome from, do you like the heel Turner thing better? I probably wish if I could choose that deal or this year, I'd probably go back, give up both picks and take those guys. But it's a pretty good outcome.
Yes.
This is a pretty good outcome. 3 rotation players for 1 first round pick with some protections on it is a good outcome for what the Lakers, and 3 players that do address certain needs that they have. Yeah. They're not just randos.
There's not a single player of the 3 that they brought in that does not address a specific area of need and weakness. So,
and I think this offense could be really transformed just by having 2 volume 3-point shooters on it.
Yep.
In really significant ways. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to see the show. Obviously, anything else happens on Thursday, we will be quick to get it posted because I don't want another one of these things to be scuttled by the news cycle. So we'll work quickly. And we'll see what happens Thursday night, but the big game is going to become now Saturday, and we'll see if the Lakers can hit the ground running with a very new team. It's a happy day for Lakers fans. We've got some reason for optimism, and if the Lakers fans are optimistic, it means guys in the locker room are optimistic too. We'll see everybody on Friday.